Hi, Pete.
Hey, how's it going?
Great.
Haven't seen you in like 0.2 seconds. It's good to see you.
It's been really good the last few days where we've been doing tossing some ideas around with this concept we've got called the recovery box.
Yep.
But you've been doing a little bit of additional work and put some stuff down on the contact paper.
Yeah, whiteboard.
Whiteboard, that's it.
Yeah.
So
Once you put it on there, it's a whiteboard.
would you like to just talk a little bit about what your thoughts are and how you've actually come to this?
Okay. So I don't know if I'll cover the recovery box already, but the idea is to set up a little mini computer that has access to all the recovery resources and multiple resources in a way to target to consumers or organisations in the sense that all the resources are in one place, and from there you can span multiple projects. Obviously we can put video recovery resources in there. There's always one guy in a conference that just doesn't have his phone switched off. Anyway, so you can target to multiple people. Now you can target that with videos. There's a lot of good videos out there. There's a lot of good work out there, but it's really hard to find it all, and I just don't think that the consumers have the time or the motivation or whatever to start filtering through it. So if we can put that on a platform where they can access it and live stream it, then that will help a lot of people, and we can then categorise it into different categories to cater to the different stages of recovery. Now furthermore, we can expand on this in a lot of ways because it allows us to run training and things. It allows us to design apps. We can do things like an app that allows clinicians the ability to create their own interactive app for the recovery box. And I think a Lifeline and Men's Line, when I see this, because they have a chat service now. They used to just be, you ring up and go, shit's all fucked up, you know, help me out. But now they have a chat service. And you could hypothetically or quite literally go to Lifeline and Men's Line and go, hey look, we're doing this thing, would you like to put an app on the box? And whether they design the app that goes on that accesses a chat service, so the consumer or whoever in their own home having a shit time. Some people have phone anxiety, I think it's a real thing, and they just struggle to talk on the phone. Even when people are emotional, they struggle to talk on the phone. But if you had a chat app, it depersonalises it, that they can talk and talk through stuff. So if they had that app specifically on their box that had access to all recovery resources as well, then what they could do is they could click it and start talking to people through the hard time. So you could then target that to places like Lifeline and Men's Line. Beyond Blue have Mood Gym. Mood Gym's a really good CBT program, and it's an interactive one that you go through, and it gives you like questions like, give you scenarios. This person did this to this person, and this is what they were thinking and feeling. What were you thinking and feeling? And it goes through, and there's like varying degrees of different things you could think or feel about that situation. And for most of us who have a bit of low self-esteem or negative self-talk going on, usually in the top 3 of those things, which is, and it then gives you an alternative to reframe that. And the idea of Mood Gym, as I understand it, is you go through the course for 6 weeks, you do a little bit every night, and it has that CBT effect of changing your thinking patterns, gives you some ideas and exercise to process. Now, the possibility of doing apps like that to be able to put on the recovery box are just limitless, and we are moving towards a digital therapy type era, at least when you've got your interactive programs, DBT, all these things, EFT, all this stuff can be put in an interactive app. If we have an app that allows clinicians and services the ability to create their own interactive app and put on the box, then that's going to aid more recovery options and more accessibility to good therapy or online therapy or whatever. So we can do that. That's one avenue. You can also do an app that encourages people to do healthy tasks. I saw Fitbit. I've got a friend at Fitbit. She was really depressed, and she was on Seroquel, and she started to put on a bit of weight. I got her Fitbit. And it was interesting because when she started walking with the Fitbit have these little games in it, and it has these little challenges. So what happened is she got really boosted up. She wanted to complete these challenges, and you know, humans do have a bit of a competitive nature, and we do have the whole risk-reward scenario. So when you are accomplishing stuff, it does make you feel good, and it's easier to sort of get up and going when you've got that drive. So we could expand into, you know, an app that does that. We could even link some sort of YouTube Fitbit type scenario to it as an optional extra accessory or whatever. So, and therefore people could access and complete those challenges and things and tick them off, and you do get that sense of, oh yeah, I did this today when you complete that challenge off. So the end result is you could do that. Because what happens with a lot of emotional stuff for people is that they enter an amygdala hijack, which means they lose their rational thinking. The way to get out of that intense emotional state is usually, a lot of people talk about self-soothing strategies, ways to deal with things. And I think for a lot of us who've gone through the mental health system, you know, past history of trauma, we haven't had the chance or the stability to learn those self-soothing strategies. I know that my journey myself has been a lot about learning ways to self-soothe. But a lot of the ways I did that when I was upset or emotional or angry or really worked up was I would start doing things that'll get me thinking logical. And it sounds stupid, but things like Sudoku, Rubik's Cube, you know, cards, anything that'll get me doing things logical. I actually had a rule that when I was running a suicide support line, if people rang me, the first thing I would do was I'd listen for a bit, and then I'll explain to them that they're emotional and stuff. I'd often get people going, can't handle this, life's too much, so I'll go, yeah, fair enough. And I'm quite fine if you want to go ahead with that at the end of this process. I'm not going to stop you. But one thing that I want to do with you first is I want to go through this game we play to calm down. And I would go through the alphabet. I'll get them to pick like an animal or a town or, you know, a subject, flora, fauna, food. And I will take A to start off. And I will come up with one starting with A, and they will start up with one called something to do starting with B. And it was interesting because sometimes they were so worked up and so emotional, they just thought it was stupid that they wouldn't do the next one. So I'll keep doing that until they picked one up. And as we went through that process, they're using the logical part of their brain, so they're pulling themselves out of that worked up emotional state and able to think logically. And it was interesting, at the end of that, they were able to have a discussion about things, and it was much easier to help them reframe their experiences in a perspective and provide options to give them some optimism about moving forward and formulate a bit of a game plan. So you could do things like that get people thinking logically and get the brain to switch back to logical mode. Doug runs this Team Marble Challenge thing, and I'm pretty sure we can turn that into a game. You know, I'm pretty sure we can have that situation there. And you'd have multiple other organisations and peer-run projects and whatever running their own thing. I'm pretty sure we could turn it into different games.
Well, one of the things you talked about yesterday was around there's not a lot of stuff out there to teach people how to do advocacy, and I think this has got some huge possibilities.
Yeah. It allows us to deliver training. So one of the big things when I was in the movement and I was on stage and stuff and I was doing conferences, one of the things that I noticed is a lot of people can't get to the functions. They can't get to the services that are providing the conference. Now, a lot of the time, the biggest thing about that was not really cost, surprisingly. Like, people were okay with cost a lot of the time. It was a factor for some people, but the biggest factor was being able to get there. Like, we're in Victoria at the moment, but say there's a conference in Adelaide, to go there, people would actually have to pay their ticket. Now the ticket might be affordable for consumers, and they might go, yes, this is $60 or $100, I'm happy to pay this for 4 days conference. Having said that, they then have to pay for travel, they then have to pay for accommodation, and for a lot of guys this is just unachievable. Another contributing factor that stopped people going was social isolation. For a long time, I think part of the recovery, you're all at different stages, and one of the things, you can be at this really anxious stage and it's just hard to be around people, so the thought of going to a conference, and geez, I remember when I was like maybe 20 years ago, the thought of going to crowd would send me back in the ward. I'd just have a freaking breakdown over it because I couldn't handle that thought. It was too much. And I mean purely anxiety, because you're overthinking things that haven't happened. And I think for a lot of guys this is normal, this is what they're going through at this point. It won't be where they're always at, but it's where they're at, and you've got to sort of provide an option to that. So if they can actually access training in their own home, and they can get to go and see these things and get to go to these conferences in a digital sense, not only can it provide like a lower cost ticket, but it can also, and that of course brings in revenue to the recovery movements and conferences, etc., which helps us expand and make them better. But it also allows people to access things that they wouldn't normally be able to access. And that expands to so many things. I mean, you can start running groups. One of the big problems with a lot of stuff when people are at the first stage of recovery and stuff is they can't get out. They can't go and hang around people. It's too much for them. And they will work through that. But in order to work through that, you've got to get them to that first group. And that's really hard. One of the other problems is that when I was doing Human Voices group stuff, and I spoke to a lot of people in Australia and America and all this sort of stuff, and one of the biggest problems was that they couldn't get to a group because it was 3 hours away. The nearest one was 3 hours away, or 4 hours away, or 6 hours away, or there just wasn't one in their area at all. And look, maybe that'll change over time, and there'll be like a group on every corner, like 7-Eleven. But at the end of the day, if you can deliver groups to people, and you can actually deliver like your 12-step programs, because that first thing, I'm not really specifically a fan of 12-step, but I think different personalities, it does work for a lot of people. I'm just very stubborn, so that's probably why. But at the end result is that, you know, that first walk into a meeting when you've been using drugs or you've been dealing with alcoholism or anything like that, that first walk into the meeting, it's shit scary. Like it really is. And I think any time we first go for help is just absolutely petrifying because you don't know what to expect. It's going to change things. Let's be honest, a lot of us who ever really have any of these problems have a history of trauma, and people who have a history of trauma, change is scary because things change once and we ended up hurt from it, so the brain sort of develops this stuff to make it very difficult to make that first step. But if that first step is as easy as turning on your recovery box at this time because this group that you want to attend is on, it still might be a little bit hard for some people, but it's going to be a hell of a lot easier. It's going to be easy to cross that bridge. Obviously the aim is, if there is a program in the area, just step them into going there as they feel more comfortable, but you're breaking that bridge. And most of the time, if the group is set to an area that they live in, they're just going to go and see old friends that they've been communicating with.
Well, that's where the peer work and the peer support comes in.
Yeah.
Is that, because people of the group, they would then start to connect with the person that's there for the first couple of times.
Yeah.
And I can see some real benefits with that.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, look, I remember when I was first locked up and I first got out, and my world had changed. I was put in a situation where things were just scary. A lot of stuff happened in the psych ward to me that just shocked me, and I came out quite, I'm going to say broken, and I was therefore really cautious around other people. Now, I ended up in a PDRS service. I would have been about 16 at the time, 17, and I was still quite badly hearing voices, and I was freaked out at this PDRS service with all these people that I didn't know. I was just dumped there, and it was really difficult for me, and I sat there saying nothing, doing nothing, being hypervigilant, looking around really paranoid, just wanting to go home. My heart's going boom, 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 boom. I like to think that wasn't all the medication I was on, it was actually a lot of anxiety and paranoia. But I had one guy come up to me and just go, he introduced himself, and he said, g'day mate, I'm so-and-so, what are you here for, blah, 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 do you want me to show you around? And he took me around and he showed me around, and then he said, look, this is too much, let's go fish and chips. We'll go get some fish and chips and have a talk out of here. Now, mind you, this guy was a consumer, yeah? And he wasn't like in any sort of leadership role or nothing, he just saw that I was struggling and stepped in. Still friends with him now, like 20 years later, and we're still like best mates. So, the end result is that that made a massive difference to me, and he introduced me to people, and because he was so friendly, he talked to a lot of people, and because I was knocking around with him for a few days, I sort of felt more comfortable to start conversation with some of these people because I knew them from him talking to them. And I think if you can provide an access even where people can listen and start getting comfortable with other people, it sort of steps in, everything's on a process, and you've got to take these steps. Well, you don't got to, but people generally take these steps forward at a rate. You can't push it further, you've got to let the process evolve. And it does happen for all of us. You think it won't, but it will. But if we can then do access to that, what we can do is get HD 720